Homer was born the oldest of all of us in the old home, as it was called. And by the time he was 2, we'd moved into the big house on Crystal Avenue. Homer and Rick and I had been mothers 3 under 3. We were born before Homer was 3 years old. That meant that Rick and I went through school in the same grade, and Homer was just a grade ahead, so we did many, many things together. And then Gil came along 4 years later to join us. As Homer grew up, I remember that he was one who Mother called dreamy. He was the oldest of us and had a power of concentration that was simply astonishing. Just out of high school, Homer and Wally Bennett, who was the son of Father's business partner, Senator Bennett, decided that they'd make some money, big money, by raising produce in Lone Tree, Wyoming. They even had a truck, an old rickety truck to bring the produce into town to sell. The trouble was that they never had anything to put in the truck to sell because the sheep got in, the cattle got in, everything got through whatever they put up to keep it out of the garden. While I grew up with Homer as my kind of idol and someone to look to and support and cheer for as he played football at East High School and later at the University of Utah as quarterback, my father and mother had a kind of motto that I've put into words that said, try hard, play fair, have fun. And no matter what we were doing, this seemed to apply as a real precept in our lives. When Homer came home from the Navy Air Corps, he became a different kind of student than he'd been when he was a freshman, just before he went. Then he'd sort of majored in football and girls and Sigma Chi. And when he did come home, Richard and I decided that we'd set him up with a girl that we liked a whole lot. Her name was Catherine Ann Romney.
I was so fond of Emmylou and Rick and knew them quite well. And they were telling about their football playing big brother, which I was always enamored with football players. So football was a love of my life. And here he was a football player and a Navy flyer, and everything sounded just really very exciting. And this sort of got me thinking. And when he came home on leave, Richard asked me, he was going with my roommate at the time, and he asked me if I'd go out with Homer. And I said, yes, I would love to. So I already had my mind made up before I ever even met him.
I first met him, Dr. Stevenson in the electrical engineering department said, hey, you guys ought to go over and meet Homer Warner. 3 of us ended up getting PhDs through him, and it was really that first meeting. He says, well, hey, you have to come and work with me. You've got to go to graduate school. And what's graduate school? I grew up in Little St. George. I don't know what that is.
The history of LDS Hospital is made remarkable by people like Homer Warner, who is an icon in medical informatics, of course, known around the world.
I've been in healthcare IT for 20 years, and I've heard of Homer Warner for all 20 of those years. I started in healthcare in Washington, D.C., and was aware of the HELP system and the things that they were doing. Homer was definitely known as the father of that system and the brains behind clinical decision support in healthcare.
Homer was just so positive in everything that he did. If you had a little bit of a struggle, he'd take you in and counsel you and work with you. But he was just remarkable as a human being in how he treated you, and always positive, always encouraging. He really had a lot of confidence in people and put people like me way out in front of where we should have been at the time. So he was remarkable for building great leaders in this field.
Homer Warner, absolutely, his legacy drives much of what I believe we should be doing. I think we have to personalize care. I think the care has to emanate from the clinical setting, and I think Homer epitomized that. He worked in LDS Hospital his whole career. You know, he wasn't in some kind of corporate organization. So he really built tools that worked in the clinical setting. And that's something we're striving to do, and it's certainly due to his inspiration.
Homer was very much a mentor. I mean, he always laid out the plan that was, in my mind, I thought 10,000 miles beyond where I could ever get, but then provided the enthusiasm, the encouragement. He had a vision that was remarkable for that 40 years ago when we were barely able to get data into a digital computer at all. We talk about having a computer with a megabyte of memory. Well, I remember we had a computer with 32,000 bytes of memory. I mean, you look back at it now and say, how were we brave enough even to try it? But we were able to do it, and still things that we did even 15, 20 years ago at LDS Hospital are not being done elsewhere.
The story goes that when he was learning about cardiac catheterization and there was this perceived risk, probably real risk, that inappropriate catheterization could start fatal arrhythmias in your heart, not wanting to learn on other people, they learned on themselves by doing cardiac catheterization on themselves and measuring pressures inside the heart. So Homer would run up and down the stairs to elevate his heart rate and then stick in the catheter to see what was going on. And I mean, how many of us have that dedication to our profession that we're willing to take those kind of personal risks? That's an extraordinary person who would do a thing like that.
So he gave us a very unique opportunity. I didn't realize until 15, 20 years later that we were that far ahead of the pack.
We have a 25-year head start over anyone because of the work pioneered by Homer Warner in clinical decision support, in the application of clinical documentation in the acute care setting. GE, one of the top 2 companies in the world, decided to partner with Intermountain Healthcare because of the expertise we've brought to healthcare information systems. What we've endeavored to do is not just replicate the information systems that are out there, but to truly develop systems that will change healthcare. And we're doing that, again, based on many of the principles pioneered by Homer Warner.
The 2 things that Homer taught us was to have a can-do attitude, and probably even more importantly than that, just to be truthful and honest, and that those characteristics will be enduring for the whole field of science, and Homer taught those as well as anyone I know. He's still very much alive and has a wonderful, positive attitude about everything, and is just very encouraging to everyone he deals with. A marvelous mentor and a fantastic human being. We really appreciate him.